Call to order the May 10th, 2017 meeting of the PDC Commission. Pam, if you would call the roll.
Commissioner Cruz?
Here.
Eidman?
Here.
Moreland Capulla? Here. Myers? Chair Kelly?
Here. Commissioner reports. So shall we start with Commissioner Cruz as usual?
Sure. All right. So these are not all PDC meetings. They're actually more community meetings, but I had a Northwest District Association Board meeting on April 17th, a Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber Board meeting on the 18th, PDC Inclusive Entrepreneurship RFP meeting on the 20th, an NWDA XCOM meeting on the 1st, Portland Business Alliance annual meeting and breakfast, which a number of us attended on the 2nd, the Meals on Wheels annual luncheon on the 3rd, the Oregon Hispanic Bar Association Cinco de Mayo event on the 4th, Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber Annual Scholarship Luncheon on the 5th, Portland Center Stage Gala, which several of us attended as well, on the 6th, Commissioner briefing, and then a very nice strategic communications and brand plan event here on Monday night. That's my list.
In addition to the same last three, I had meetings with North De La Salle, MISO, PNCA, Albertina Kerr, Sustainable Northwest, the Bullitt Foundation, and Mara Memorial Trust.
Commissioner Capulla.
Nothing to report.
Okay, I attended the Broadway Corridor Owners meeting, the Asian Health Center groundbreaking. I was at the Portland Center Stage Gala, and I have to say I won the trip to Mexico.
Oh, did you?
How about that, huh?
Congratulations.
So that's my report. Oh, well, I just testified before the City Commission in the last hour and a half, and that all went well. So I will turn it over to our Executive Director, Kimberly.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners. We've had a busy month. I joined a number of you and a lot of community members at the groundbreaking for the Asian Health and Service Center on April 22nd. I think probably in the most fitting way, there were 7 children who did the groundbreaking and talked about it as a bridge of generations. So fantastic event. I'd like to recognize the PDC team who helped move this project forward. So I want to particularly acknowledge Layla Aman, Allison Wicks, Laura Alsenis, Karen Harris, John Cardenas, Ann Mangan, and Lisa Norwood. It was a particularly complex transaction, so appreciate their hard work. As part of Design Week Portland, I also was able to participate in a presentation on the Green Loop, which is a concept within the Central City 2035 plan. And so we highlighted the vision for the post office project as a key part of that. The Portland Tribune recently ran a feature on the Oregon Black Pioneers and the fact that the all-volunteer nonprofit is receiving the University of Oregon's George McMath Historic Preservation Award. It's presented annually by the U of O within the School of Architecture and Allied Arts, but this is the first time that an organization has received this award, and this is great news in general, but it's particularly meaningful to us because our own Kim Moreland is Vice President of the Oregon Black Pioneers, so I want to particularly congratulate her for her leadership in this work. You can learn more, thank you, at OregonBlackPioneers.org. I also had a chance to attend NAIA Early College Academy Luncheon on April 26th. This luncheon celebrates the success of the high school and it profiles students who overcame significant challenges. And although we feel that every week is Small Business Week, we celebrated National Small Business Week last week by highlighting some of the great work our local small businesses and our Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative and Main Street Networks are doing. Would like to recognize Morgan Masterman and the Community Economic Development team for highlighting those great stories, as well as our partners within the Small Business Technical Assistance Program Network. PDC, in partnership with the Oregon Department of Transportation, hosted a drop-in open house for Union Station on May 3rd. You'll receive an update shortly on the project, but I do want to acknowledge the hard work of Elise Hendrickson, as well as Ann Mangan and Lisa Norwood in coordinating this event. There were almost 40 or more than 40 community members who came for that event. I attended the Apano Voices of Change event on May 4th, which was primarily a fundraiser for Roots to Rise, which is a project that they're doing in partnership with Rose CDC. The J District will have cultural space and business retail space on the ground floor, so that's an exciting project. PDC led the pop-up Portland trade mission to Japan in late April and early May. This was the 4th year of the mission. This year, the companies that participated included Cycle Dog, Go Me Kids, Black Packs, Aurochs Leather, Oru Jewelry, Jaybird Collective, and Pistol. The entire 8th floor of a department store was dedicated to Portland and these Portland products. So would like to thank Mitsu Yamazaki and Sue Ball for all their efforts to make this such a popular event. I was also able to attend the Hispanic Metropolitan Chamber Scholarship Awards luncheon along with Commissioner Cruz on May 5th and provided an update on our communication strategy to key partners and stakeholders on Monday, May 8th. I'd like to recognize Myra Ariola, Sean Ullman, Lisa Norwood, Ann Mangan, John Cardenas, Craig, and the entire IT team, as well as a host of other PDC staff who have been working furiously behind the scenes to prepare us for the implementation of the communication strategy. Going forward, we'll be attending the Oregon International Business Awards and Counselor Corps Scholarship Gala on May 15th. And finally, we have committed to presenting monthly reports on our negotiations with VOES and the Day Laborers site. So we've continued meeting weekly, either in person or by phone. We're continuing to discuss key terms within the LOI regarding the length of the lease extension, the terms of property acquisition, and a special authority grant to support the pre-development agreement. We've agreed to offer Spanish translation services and are procuring that for all contract and agreement documents. And we also agreed to provide $1,000 to the Worker Center for repairs after it was damaged recently. So that's the update.
Thank you. We have the meeting minutes of the April 12th meeting to approve.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. The motion carries. We have one individual who's signed up for public comment. He gets 3 minutes to come on up. Mr. Herman, Stan Herman.
Well, I actually didn't come down here for a speech or anything, but since I saw that on the agenda that was open, I said, well, I'll take advantage of it. And I own a 77,000 square foot warehouse, and I've got some people that want to work with me to develop 3 soccer fields. It overlooks, and they have a viewing area, if we could do this, over downtown Portland. And actually, if you see in the pictures, a facility for canoes and kayaks for kids that my nonprofit group is putting together to get kids in the neighborhood, the metro area, to come down and enjoy the Willamette River. This is a 125-year-old building. I hate to see it destroyed or put down, and I think it's savable, and we can probably do something great for the community. Didn't know what I could ask you guys for. I guess I'm here to say, hey, I've got this product, I got this program. We got $2 million cash to do some improvements, and we're not the poor kid on the block looking for a handout. We're just the right guy to look for a public and private partnership to do something great for the community. The zoning, if you see in the papers, is okay for this. It's a conditional use, but there is zoning in this industrial area for this type of park and recreation. So we're not ruffling anybody's feathers there. I do own the property free and clear, so we have no debt on it. So I think we're well positioned to do something to if we can get a little help to support the community and have something great for the canoes and kayaks and soccer. And soccer's, as we all know, is a big event now in Portland. And people with me are some of the original timber players back in the 70s, 75s that is involved with this. So it's not like we got a bunch of green people getting involved with a soccer program there. They it will generate fees and it'll be self-supporting. So didn't know what direction you could point me to with PDC to maybe sit down and go over a little more details and see if we can't do something great for our community.
Thank you,
Any
Stan. I think
questions?
our executive director can give you some direction.
Yeah, so Lisa Awaf, who is here, would be the right person. There's a person on her team who we've identified that would be a great person to talk to. So she'll be able to give you some more information.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think I got a card or something, but I'll leave my card.
Yeah, Lisa's just right behind you.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in for your commitment to the community. So our first item, report 1715, is an information item on the Union Station Rehabilitation Project. Elise Hendrickson is going to come forward and present.
So Executive Director Branham, Chair Kelly, Commissioners. I'm Elise Hendrickson. I'm the Construction Services Coordinator here at PDC. And I'm here to update you on the Union Station Rehabilitation Strategy. So I will provide a summary of the proposed improvements and the public outreach process, and also talk to you about the next steps for this project. So Union Station was constructed in 1896. Its last major renovation was 1930. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, and it rivals King Street Station for passengers that came through it. So we just came in under about 600,000 last year. So PDC acquired Union Station in 1987 from the Portland Terminal Railroad Company as a redevelopment opportunity. So that property, when we purchased it, is the red outline. Portions of the property have since been developed into projects like the yards at Union Station, OSU Food Innovation Center, the Courtyard Marriott, Ziba Reach Housing, Senior Housing, and Station Place Garage, the areas identified in the green. The blue highlighted areas is the property that we currently call the Union Station property, and it consists of the main building, annex, tracks 1 through 4, the platforms, and the canopies. Track 5 continues to be owned by the Portland Terminal Railroad Company. Over the last 10 years, several critical repair and maintenance projects have been completed, including Phase 1 for the partial roof repairs completed in 2008, and Phase 2 and 2B for the remaining roof repairs. That project also included repairs or in-kind replacements of windows and doors. So the current project is Phase 3, and it includes the preliminary engineering for upgrades to tracks and buildings and the analysis of potential impacts to the human and natural environment in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act. ODOT was awarded this grant under the Federal Railroad Administration High-Speed Intercity Passenger Rail Program. PDC is the subrecipient through ODOT. Staff is working closely with ODOT as well as FRA, Amtrak, PTRR, Oregon SHPO, and other key stakeholders to complete this project. Future Phase 3B will include securing funding and completing the final design, permitting, and construction. Funding is the big unknown at this point. We are starting to compile a list of possible sources that include the Federal Transportation Investment Generating Economic Recovery, or TIGER grants, high-speed passenger rail corridor grants, Fixing America's Surface Transportation, or FAST Act grants, also referred to as the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside, historic preservation grants, sustainability or energy grants, and possible private-public partnerships. So why are we doing this? Union Station is a regional transportation gateway and iconic landmark. Union Station requires critical repairs and upgrades to address current deficiencies and meet future needs. And passenger rail is forecasted to almost double in the next 20 years. So Union Station is also part of the Broadway Corridor redevelopment plan, along with the post office site. The framework plan recognizes the opportunity to revitalize Union Station as a gateway to the city and the neighborhood. And I'll talk more about how these projects are tied together at the end of this presentation. As part of this project, we are proposing improvements to the station, annex, platforms and canopies, and tracks. The main building and annex improvements are largely to bring these buildings up to current codes and include seismic upgrades, ADA and egress upgrades, and replacing aging mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. We are proposing to raise the height of the existing platforms to comply with federal level boarding requirements, replace the existing canopies with taller and wider structures, and improve lighting and wayfinding. Part of the track improvements include shifting the passenger crossing location north to accommodate the 700-foot-long Cascade trains to both the north and south of the crossing to increase train capacity, replacing the existing fuel delivery system, reinstating Track 6 as a freight bypass, and adding an additional track at Northwest 9th Crossing to facilitate train movements and required train inspections. In addition to the preliminary engineering, PDC and ODOT are preparing an evaluation of the proposed changes to the buildings and tracks to assess potential impacts of the proposed project to the human and natural environment. The evaluation will consider all of the bulleted items. The early findings are showing no effects anticipated or not applicable to the categories that are highlighted in black. We are anticipating some effects, which could be positive as well as negative for about half of the categories. There are two categories, historic resources and noise and vibration, which will likely have higher level of effects. Again, these effects could be positive and negative. So what you see before you is an overview of the project schedule and key milestones. So for the Phase 3 grant work, PDC and the 3 consultant teams have spent about a year doing a conditions assessment. We developed project concepts, coordinating closely with the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office early on, since we recognized that this was an important historic structure. We then selected and refined the proposed project. We are currently evaluating the proposed project and pursuing public and agency review and comments. After this phase, we'll continue to consult with Oregon SHPO and other consulting parties. We'll confirm the proposed project and then complete the NEPA engineering and required NEPA documentation. That would, in the winter of 2008, that'll complete the current grant work. After that, we'll work on obtaining project funding for the final design and construction. We anticipate that will take several years, with the final design, permitting, and construction likely not to start before 2020, and it would be contingent on funding. So we are currently wrapping up a robust public outreach process to solicit feedback about the proposed changes to the building and tracks. Comments are invited from all interested organizations and the public regarding the proposed project. Feedback will be considered in the refinement of the proposed project. There are several ways that the public could comment. We created a project webpage. We held a tenant open house. We held a public open house here at PDC. There's also opportunities online with a SurveyMonkey form where folks could submit comments via that survey, and then today's board meeting. The tenants' feedback, we had about 20 tenants who attended, and they were largely concerned with if and when they would need to move, if there would be money for relocating, and if rents would increase. They wondered if PDC would maintain ownership of the station, and they wanted provisions to reduce fumes from idling trains, vehicles, and smokers, but they also wanted to keep the windows operable. The public comments were largely supportive and more varied. There were concerns about pedestrian and bike safety and increased noise due to more trains at the Northwest 9th Crossing, and safety and security related to homelessness and drug dealing in and around the station and the surrounding neighborhood. There were several questions about how this project is coordinating with the Broadway Corridor project. They wanted better bike and pedestrian connections to the adjacent neighborhoods, parks, and the river. The timing of the Union Station and Broadway Corridor projects appear to be well synced. The upcoming Broadway Corridor master planning and community benefit discussion, anticipated to occur throughout 2018, will integrate and closely coordinate with the Union Station project. Future Broadway Corridor planning will also consider activation and configuration of the public area immediately adjacent to Union Station and integration with other adjacent multimodal transportation units. Depending in part on funding, it's possible the final design, permitting, and construction of both projects will run on parallel tracks. For our next step, we're compiling, reviewing, and responding to public comments. We'll confirm the NEPA classification and complete the preliminary engineering. As part of the preliminary engineering process, we will develop cost estimates, prioritize critical improvements, and create a project phasing strategy, and identify potential funding sources. At the end of that, we'll return to the PDC board to present the confirmed project, cost estimates, schedule, and funding strategy. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, no questions? I guess you did just such a great job that
Wow, look at that.
we're all updated. Thank you. Okay. Our next order of business is adopting, it's Report 1716, Resolution 7232, and that is the adopting the PDC communication strategy. Myra and Sean are going to come forward.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Executive Director Kimberly Branham. I'm Mayra Arreola, Director of Social Equity Policy and Communications at PDC.
And I'm Sean Ullman, the Public Affairs Manager at PDC.
We are here today to seek approval for a new communication strategy, including a new agency name. And as part of the presentation, we're going to share a high-level overview of the history of the agency and also a rationale for this strategy. If there are any questions throughout the presentation, please let us know. And also towards the end, we have some time for questions and comments from your end. With that, Sean is going to guide us through the first part of the presentation.
Go ahead. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So what I really wanted to do with today's portion that I'm really leading here is talk about who we are and where we've been. And I know it's familiar for everyone, but at the same time, I think at a high level, this process and what we've gone through over the last 6 or 7 months or so has been really educational for me as someone who was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I'm from here. So I've thought I've had a sense of this, but when you really start digging into it, hearing more of the research, learning more of the experiences that people have had, I can't tell you how enlightening this has been for me personally. And so as we really start to dig into this, I think to myself, like, I thought I knew this, I thought I knew where we were going. I came to work at PDC to cause change in a good way, but when I see all the things that have gone on here, I think now we're at the point where we really can start to affect things in a good way. And I'm really excited and tremendously pleased to be here because I'm very proud of this work, and for me personally, I think it really is telling for where we're going to go, and it's truly inspiring to work for Kimberly and all of you because this to me is truly the turning point. So my editorial aside, I do want to remind everyone who we are and what we do for everyone's benefit. So we are the Economic and Urban Renewal Agency for the City of Portland. And we were originally created to take advantage of economic development tools allowed through the Urban Renewal Authority. Now what that meant is that we, and again, as most of everyone knows, lots of cities across the country in the 50s and 60s were taking advantage of urban renewal and what it could do. And like many others, Portland started doing that, and I think we learned from some of the other cities the practices that they were using. And they've generated, the philosophies that really guided our work. For Portland, what we saw, and it's widely known and recorded through many different people, that there have been essentially these 3 phases of Portland. These grand projects phase, which were the first real phase. The urban renewal efforts, which were a little more focused on neighborhoods and the downtown commitment. And then this third entrepreneurial spirit phase that I think we're still sort of in, where it's much more about citizen involvement. And I think we're in a phase now where it's still really enjoying that more involved, that more robust conversation. But I think for me, we really want to talk more about those first 2 phases and what that meant and how that informed where we are now. So with that, I think it's important to first start out talking about the Portland that many of us know. But I think it's important to also note how complex the city is from a relationship with a citizen standpoint, how we're viewed by outside parties, and how just generally the perceptions are about the city. So I think people think of Portland, they think of the Pearl District, Tanner Springs here, and all that has meant to, again, Northwest Portland, and really emblematic of what this change has looked like, and what the power of PDC, when it comes together through public and private, to create something out of literally almost nothing with the rail yard that was there. And what it has now become is a vibrant piece of Portland and something that I think we all should be and could be proud of. And again, it's more of the same. If you look at Pioneer Courthouse Square, which was a parking lot and a gas station, and it has become the living room of the city. If you look at the Lansu Garden, again, a few blocks from here, if you've never been, folks, you should definitely go by and take a look. It is an amazing facility, and PDC played a key role in that. The East Bank Esplanade, again, clearly defines who we are and what we stand for from a transportation standpoint. As well as some neighborhood work, more recently with Dawson Park. I think if you talk infrastructure, parks, again, this is probably familiar to most, but I think that's not something we get a lot of credit for over the years. PDC has been involved in MAX, light rail, been involved in streetcar, been involved in more infrastructure and sidewalk projects than you can probably count. So I think to talk about that as far as from a commitment standpoint, it's truly impressive as far as what we've done to help shape the city. But again, when we talk about Portland and we talk about PDC, it's complicated. And that's really what's informed this process for us. Because almost immediately after PDC was formed, the first thing we really did was implement these discriminatory practices that we were seeing played out in other cities. We weren't unique in that, and it's certainly something that we should continue to learn from. But as you see on the slide on the left, in the South Auditorium District, on the slide on the right in Northeast Portland, these were areas that were deemed by the authority as things that needed to be dealt with by us, without involving the people who are actually living, working there, shopping there, and engaged in these communities. So this slide is very impressive, I think, from the standpoint of what it is and represents. So for scale here at the bottom, you can see the start of Interstate 405. That's, again, about 1960 or so. So the freeway is not yet built, but you can see all this vacant land. And what this once was a vibrant neighborhood. So the Jewish community, African-American community, Italian community that had moved to Portland, all of those people were removed. Not compensated, hardly given notice, and again, it was done in the name of progress. These practices that we employed here in the South Auditorium District were then taken to North and Northeast Portland. But first I want to show you this slide. I really, really like this slide. And I want to read, if you'll bear with me, the top left-hand corner that says, "The only slums we have in Portland is the garbage in City Hall, the courts, and the Portland Development Commission." It's staggering to think about. So again, these were decisions that were made without involving these people, without in any way informing them. In fact, if I may relay a really brief story, I was talking to our consultant, Lee Weinstein, and he was telling me that his family, his great-grandparents, played a role in developing the synagogue in South Portland that PDC played a role in destroying. And when you think about that, again, these personal stories, everyone has these connections, and that truly has informed this process for me personally. So again, we moved on to North and Northeast Portland with a lot of the work that was happening. And then around this time frame again, it's late 1950s, early 1960s. Vibrant communities that decisions were being made that these were in the way of stopping progress of the Memorial Coliseum, the Interstate 5 freeway, things that had to be removed, and again, without compensation. And folks, again, we're not in any way benefiting from this progress that's alleged to be happening. So as these communities were being destroyed, a few were benefiting, but certainly not all Portlanders. And neighborhood residents and businesses were not included, either in the process at the front end, they weren't engaged to get their views, they certainly were not well compensated for any property that was deemed to be taken on behalf of eminent domain. And this picture for me, I think for most people, is really emblematic of what we think of when we think of urban renewal in its most traditional or coarse sense, as a bulldozer in a neighborhood. And I think for many people, this is an image that clearly ties to PDC and our role in parts of this city. And if we've grown up in other parts of town or enjoyed more privilege, this is a foreign idea or a foreign picture perhaps. But for a lot of folks, this is something that clearly defines the relationship they have to PDC. And that's a legacy that continues to this day. And it's something that is a true inhibitor to the work we want to do as we create a Portland that truly benefits all citizens. And it's impossible to do that from the standpoint of if we have that name and if we have this baggage, there's never going to be true engagement. And I guess the other thing I want to mention is this is not an attempt to run from the past or to change it in any way, but we need to acknowledge it and have it inform where we are and where we're going forward. And only then, I think, can we truly get to this next level where we want to be. But in order to move that forward, we have to actively participate in acknowledging this and having it inform where we go and where we go forward. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Myra.
Thank you, Sean. So in recognition and acknowledgement of that history and the practices and strategies that the agency employed in city development, this agency, approximately a decade ago, started to engage in different cultural change and also a journey that led to today. So some of the changes that were implemented first was a business and workforce equity policy that really ensured that diverse contractors and workers had equitable and increased access to opportunities. The next phase was creating a neighborhood economic development strategy that focused on starting to ask the question of who benefits and making sure that communities of color and historically disenfranchised communities had also more access to placemaking and wealth creation. It also started incorporating community-led, community-driven approaches, and those approaches led to the development and creation of the neighborhood prosperity initiatives. Along those lines, the agency also recognized that it wasn't only just about delivery and programs, but we also needed to look at the culture and the way in which staff operated and absorbed and engaged in equity conversations, but also assessing our own approach and our own beliefs and how those influence and help shape those programs and outcomes for communities. So the agency engaged with Crossroads, which is an anti-racism organization, and they developed and delivered several trainings for staff, and that led to the creation of our Equity Council. That's still in place today. Around 2015, in 2015, the agency also adopted the latest strategic plan that sets the course of the goal of creating widely shared prosperity for all Portlanders. And it focuses on doing so by increasing access to employment, by creating healthy, complete neighborhoods, by augmenting opportunities for equitable wealth creation, and also by strengthening and developing civic networks, institutions, and partnerships throughout the city. So we are in the almost third year of the implementation of the plan, and although some of the things are really moving forward in a great way, we also recognize the need to enhance our ability to communicate more effectively and to really showcase the role that the agency has in economic development and the journey that the agency has embarked on around equity and increasing access for communities of color. As we shared last month, the communication strategy was identified in the last month, and first, my apologies, in the last fall, this was a priority that was identified and also prioritized as a strategy to move forward and go through this process of identifying what can we do better and how can we enhance our capacity to communicate and tell our story and increase our outcomes. So we embarked in a very extensive process where there was a lot of exhaustive community engagement, stakeholder engagement, internal and external, research, pollings, engagements of advisory bodies, and that led to key findings. And those findings really focused on different things. First, the impression that community had about the agency. So some of the things that were found were that the agency is nimble, that things long-term, and it tackles really complex problems. The second thing that came up were the perceptions around the agency, which in majority were not necessarily really positive. And those perceptions were based in truth and based on the history and some of the overview that Sean just led us through. And one of the things, how do we make sure that the strategy is not just window dressing, that we're not just saying something, but really not changing or enhancing our behavior to become more equitable? How do we showcase that there's a lot of equity development strategies, that there are a lot of equity development strategies that the agency develops and supports and provides, and that is more than real estate development? And how, recognizing the role that the agency has on urban development, how do we then partner differently and engage with community differently so we don't contribute to gentrification? And the last thing is that communities, for the most part, really didn't have a really strong notion of what the agency was all about. So out of those findings, some of the recommendations that came out are to become more focused on outcomes and metrics, to increase focus on social equity and storytelling, in creating new community connections, primarily with communities of color or communities that we have not partnered with for the most part, and also to tie better our words with visuals. How do we showcase our work in a way that is more impactful and in more alignment with what the strategic plan set us out to do? So the recommendations, we also share this, I believe, at the last commissioners meeting, were around like creating a frame that really showcases better the work of the agency and really start looking at our outcomes and positioning us to not only talk about or report out what we're doing, but also analyzing and measuring our progress in how we're making the city a better place to live and work and to create more a better sense of place and belonging. So the primary message is that the agency is focusing on building an equitable economy, and we're doing so by growing family wage jobs, by advancing opportunities for prosperity, by collaborating with partners for an equitable city, and also by creating vibrant neighborhoods and communities. So in this, given these messages and the findings, one of the main recommendations that came out was the opportunity to really take a look at the name and like rebranding the agency as a whole. So how can we take, like John mentioned earlier, how can we take and like what we have learned from the history and past practices and not negate that story, but absorb it and kind of own it, but not only own it, yet use it to learn and as a foundational approach for us to how we want, what the expectation we want to have and how we want to increase the outcomes for communities of color. So with that, the proposed name is Prosper Portland, and we're building an equitable economy. This name aims to create a more transparent, a more aligned name and tagline for what we do, where we showcase that we're doing this work in partnership with communities, with other agencies, with different groups, that we work in different areas of the city, and that prosperity really means not only urban development, but economic development, increasing support for businesses, increasing a sense of belonging, like I mentioned earlier, and really working in partnership with communities to increase prosperity for all. So with that, some of our next steps is one is what, right now, today, hopefully voting to adopt the new name and the communication strategy, then the launching and implementation of the program, and then it really is about implementation and evaluation and communicating with partners, with other agencies, and just sharing the message, doing a lot of kind of face-to-face interactions with communities and groups, and opening the door for a lot of opportunities and conversations around what this means for us and the symbolism that this carries. So do you have any questions or comments for us?
Well, personally, I think this is a great idea. I'm really excited about the change. I think the new name and tagline fit in well with a strategic shift in the agency towards the goal of widely shared prosperity, and I just think it's fantastic. Plus, I think it's just a much warmer and less sort of bureaucratic sounding name. So I think it's great. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really like to thank staff for embracing our past successes as well as our past failures. I think it helps all of us, reminds all of us, learn from those and move forward in a more positive fashion. I also, the outreach that occurred, all the phone interviews and whatnot, and the participation is terrific to see. I often say that on the public side, I guess I'd have to say we can do some really cool things, and those of us on the private side also have to say we can do some really cool things, but together we can do some spectacular things. And there's so many examples of that, some of those you touched on around Portland. I also think this is a great time to do it. I think under Kimberly's leadership, I mean, in the last 6, 7, 8 months, however long it's been, really feel a shift in focusing on social equity and prosperity across the board as opposed to just certain areas. And I also think that from the perspective of our business plan, TIF's going away, which was the source of all this to start with, which is kind of an interesting, for me, juxtaposition, if you will. I think those two things in combination make this an excellent time to do it. As with any branding, it's words, and it's our responsibility, all of us, to take forward and embrace it and own it and make sure that in every task we take on going forward that we're living those values with the people in this community that we're responsible to. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And I'd like to piggyback on that and just say that I think it was really important how you started this conversation today by already talking about the things that you've done that's consistent with the name change already. So in other words, this name change is really sort of catching up with some of the shifts that you've already made. And I think that that's really the more important message here, is that there's a recognition that there's a challenging history, and an acknowledgement that that history should be used as a foundation for doing better, for doing better at doing good. And I think that consistently should be communicated as often and as possible. And so I see this as we're now becoming consistent with what we say and do, right? And it's not just a name change. It's much deeper than that. This is a demonstrable commitment to effectively pivoting and doing better at doing good. So congratulations, and I see it as my sort of role to hold our feet to the fire here to make sure that we continue to stay in that vein. So it's not just what we say, but it's very much what we do, and the space in between what we say and what we do is going to be incredibly important. So thank you for kickstarting the process.
Maybe we even have the chance to fix or resurrect some things we did wrong in the past.
And those are strong words, resurrecting and fixing. I like to always reframe, but we won't go there today. I think that there's an opportunity, again, there has to be the recognition. So we can't really change yesterday, but we certainly can be very intentional in making sure that we don't repeat things that have been hurtful and damaging and challenging. And so for me, this represents more than just a name change. It demonstrates a shift in culture, internally, a shift in behavior, and a shift in what we do. So thank you.
So I think what I like about this change the most is it's really we changed PDC a lot in the last number of years, and so it's as opposed to changing the name and then changing afterwards, we're following it in the right order, I guess, would be the way I would put it. We have some people who are scheduled to testify, and the unique level of leadership that I bring to the table, we're ahead of schedule. So we do have one person who's here, and then hopefully after that person testifies, the other two will show up, and then we'll take a vote. We have Jonathan Colon to testify. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you. This is weird. I struggle with my name all my life. So my name is Jonath, Jonath, not Jonathan, and I was fortunate to have Columbus as my Spanish name, which is Colon. Without the accent, we can do colon. So this becomes very...
Sorry if I blew it.
No, you're good, you're good. This becomes very significant. I'm the Vice President of Business and Economic Development for the Hispanic Chamber, and I thank you for allowing me to do that. Names are really significant, and I think they tell a story, but it gives me an extra few minutes to be able to explain that, right? And I think that this is what we've done. I've been an internal partner to PDC now for maybe 15 years. So I feel I've grown up with PDC and have watched the transitions and watched the new policies, and half of the time, like, here we go again. And over the years, as I get older and I keep working this work, I'm beginning to see this shift. And maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, we started seeing some new policies, some innovative ways to do things, but they stuck with it. There were not studies or files that sat in your archives down in the basement. These were things that I saw on people's desks. This is things that people brought to meetings. These are things that were being referred, and not by PDC, where the change begins. When you have external partners, or you're at other meetings at other agencies, and you're hearing the equity policy, you're hearing the challenges that this agency is doing because it's being transparent, you begin to create some hope. And this blew it out of the water a few years ago when, as you mentioned, this change that's happening, they started walking the talk. And they started doing things on the ground level, which then makes sense with the name change, because it's hard to change your name and then try to put attributes. So they've been walking that path, and now they're getting the name to match that. And so we run a technical assistance program for small business, and we've done for quite a number of years. And we don't really hear about it, or you don't really see a lot of that work. I'm going to mention a couple of things that shows the work that PDC has done and how we've been able to use that work, these policies, and these programs in PDC to transform the region. 3 years ago, the city of Beaverton asked us to replicate the PDC program that we did for small businesses in their city. We were one of 2 people that were invited. The other one was MISO, another partner of PDC. The way we were able to win that, the argument, was to show history, show commitment, transformation, and where you were today. And looking at all those things reminds me that people are watching people are looking at the city as a leader, and PDC has created this momentum. The same year that Beaverton asked us to come over, the city of Vancouver said we would like to have this replicated. We see the correlation between economic and working with the community, specifically communities of color. We like the inclusiveness. That was followed with the city of Hillsborough early part of this year. And for the first time, we've seen a county, Multnomah County, if you're listening, Clark County came across the bridge to say the same thing. You guys do work here. We want you to follow this model. So everybody's paying attention to what you do, and they're very aware of your history. And if you can turn it around, they believe that they can turn around what's happening in their community. So they're learning not to wait till it gets to the point of the experience that we had here. They're actually taking your systems, they're looking at your policies, they're looking at how you're doing it. And I think that that's going to create not only a prosperous Portland, but a prosperous community and region. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Marion Haynes here from the Business Alliance. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, members of the commission. My name is Marion Haynes. I'm with the Portland Business Alliance. Thank you, Kimberly, for leading this effort and bringing this forward. We very much support the agency's strategic direction and think that the new brand and communication strategy really support those efforts that have been embarked on starting years ago, as has been noted. We have a long history of working with PDC. I think we also have done a lot of work, a recent value of jobs reports we did, that it's really evident that the prosperity that is happening in this region is not widely shared, and we need to do something about that. So we really applaud this step forward. I'm not going to belabor the same points that have been made, but we think it's great, and congratulations, and very much in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. So I don't think that Kara Stoudemire Phillips is here. Is that right? What time was she going to?
She was coming from outside and was already running a little late, so.
Proceed. I think you can.
I think we're going to proceed. Any other discussion from the commissioners? So I had a little bit of fun with Sean on the briefing on Monday. I told him I hadn't decided where I was going to vote, so I got him to squirm a little bit. So I think I got my pound of flesh out of him. So I would accept a motion.
So moved.
You don't have a resolution yet, so staff can present a walk-on, and I'll bring that to you right now.
Perfect. I mean, I'm just anxious to get this done.
Me too.
None of this official stuff, yeah, before I change my mind. Okay, so you have a resolution in front of you.
Okay, so moved to approve resolution number 7232.
Second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or making Sean squirm before we approve this?
Mission accomplished.
All those in favor signify. Oh, we're going to take a few moments to.
No, she's here.
Would you like to testify? Yeah.
More suspense for Sean.
That's right, making Sean square.
You almost
Just in
had it.
time testimony.
Sorry, I actually have a job as well. So I was asked to provide testimony, and the fact that I have served on several committees here and been a part of things that are done for PDC, with PDC for many years now, I was very excited when Kimberly shared the new name. And she gave a great history of the organization and the reason for the name change. And having been in a company that went through a name change, I definitely understand, the ups and downs of that and how it's often not perceived great, but the intentionality behind it. And so in looking at this name, it definitely speaks to what the organization does and what the organization wants to do in the future. And so I definitely think that they've captured it very well, and I think it will be very well received. And I'm excited to be a part of the future moving forward with the organization.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before we vote, I want to thank Lee Weinstein and the Brink Group for their work on this project. And at least for me personally, it's great because it's one of our, Mark Edelin and I's last meetings, and to have this accomplished as we head down the road is a pretty cool thing. So with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries.
Thank you.
Great work.
So why don't we take a few minutes break, and we're going to go in an executive session afterwards. So for those of you who don't know what that means, it basically means if you're not an executive, you got to go.